start again. It's a rich thing.
So in this session, we are going to learn about iterative statements in Python. In this, basically, we have two types of loop, that are for loop and while loop. So whenever we need to execute a set of program repeatedly, then we need to use this loop concept. So let's start with for loop. For example, we need to print hello world 50 times. So we can write for I in range, and within parentheses we need to pass 50 and then give colon. For now, forget about this thing, and I will come back to this point. And now just keep in your mind that we need to print hello world 50 times, and under this for loop we need to pass our message, that is hello world. And now let me run this code. Okay, so this is our expected output. Now coming to the first point, that is what does it mean by range of 50. Range of 10 can be think of as a container which has 10 values that are from 0 to 9. And this is the default case. Like if you pass only 10 within this parenthesis, then it will start from 0 and it will end at 9. So it means a 10 is excluded. You can also verify it. So let me first typecast it into list, and then let me print this function, that is range of 10. So here note that it is showing from 0 to 9. So here 10 is excluded. But if you want to store from 1 to 10, then you need to write range, and then within parentheses you need to first pass the starting value, that is 1, and then end value plus 1. So in this case our end value is 10. So here we need to pass 11, and then you can also mention the step value. So the default value of step is 1. So if you don't mention it, then also Python is going to take the step value as 1, which is the default one. And the step value 1 means it will store all the values from 1 to 10. But if you want to store the values from 1 to 10 by skipping one value, like you want to store 1 and then you want to skip 2, then you want to store 3 and so on, then you can pass here 2. So you can also verify it. So let me first typecast it into list, and then you can pass the range and all these things, and then press enter. So it is showing our expected output. So this is all about range function, and our next topic is what does it mean by in. Actually, in is a membership operator. So here in this line we have I in range of 50, which means 0 to 49. It actually denotes that in each iteration I is going to store each value for that particular iteration. For example, at the very first iteration the value of I will be 0, and in the next iteration the value of I will be 1, and so on. You can also verify it by printing the value of I in each iteration. To do that, we need to pass here I instead of hello world. So let me pass I, and then let me execute this program. So here note that this is the value of I in each iteration. In the first iteration, the value of I is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now I think you have understood the concept of for loop with range function. Now we will discuss about the for loop with collection data type. So if you pass a collection data type like list, tuple, or any other collection data type, then I is going to store each element of the list in each iteration. And you can also verify it. For example, here we have a list like 10, 20, 30, 40. And now if I write for I in A, and then if I print the value of I, so in the very first iteration the value of I will be 10, and in the next iteration the value of I will be 20, and so on. So let me execute this code. So this is our output, like 10, 20, and 40. So let me discuss another scenario where we need to print the list by skipping one element. For example, here we have the list and we want to print 10, and then we want to skip 20, and then print 30, skip 40, then print 50. But if you write the code like this way, then it is not going to work, because actually if you pass the list name directly, then it is not going to work. Here we need to use the indexing concept. To do that, we need to first calculate the length of A, So here the answer will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the length of A is 5. And then we need to write for I in range of, and then within parentheses we need to first write the starting index, that is 0. Why? Because we need to print the value of the first element, that is 10. So here we need to pass 0, and then we need to pass the end index. So here the end index is nothing but 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here we need to pass 4 plus 1, that is 5, and 5 is nothing but the length of the list. So here we need to pass the list, that is the length of the list, that is b, and then define the step value as 2, because if you define it as 2, then it will automatically skip one element, and then give colon and just write print and then a and pass here I. So I works as the index of this list, that is a. And now let me execute this code. So it is showing our expected output 10, then 30, then 50. Next thing that I want to mention here is end attribute. If I want to print these values horizontally, then we need to use end attribute here, like end, and then specify a space within this quotation. And let me execute this code again. So this is our output. Our next concept is nested for loop. In this case, we have a loop which is going to iterate over another loop. For example, here we have a loop like for I in range of 1, 6, and then we have the inner loop or the nested loop for j in range of 1, 6, and then we have a print statement like this. And here note that this outer loop is going to execute for 5 times. Okay, and in the very first iteration the value of I will be 1, and with this value, that is I equals to 1, this inner for loop is going to execute for 5 times. It means this, with this value 1, it is going to execute for 5 times, and then the value of I will be changed to 2, and then with this value, that is I equals to 2, this inner for loop is going to execute for another 5 times. So let me print here I, and then let me give a end attribute like this. So let me run this code. So it is showing like this. Okay, let me change the line after each iteration of this outer for loop like this, and now let me print it. Okay, so note that with value I equals to 1, the inner for loop is going to execute for 5 times. Then with value I equals to 2, this inner for loop is going to execute another 5 times. So it means this outer for loop is going to execute for 5 times, but the inner for loop is going to execute for the 5 into 5, that is 25 times. So this is all for this video.